Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition, I have chosen 5 important articles that are relevant for our exams. We have 3 columns which are very important for both prelims and mains. They require a more detailed analysis, and 2 small articles that are important only for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these articles as comprehensively as possible. And if you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And also, before I start the discussion, if you want to access a free counseling from our mentors, if you want to know more about the civil services exam and the classroom program that we offer, you can register yourself for a free counseling by sharing your details in a Google form which is provided in the video description below. The link is available in the video description. Just share your details and our team will get in touch with you. So with this, let's start by looking at this important column on page 13. The article is related to art and culture and as well as to Indian polity. This article is focused on the classical language status. Recently, the topic has been in news because the Union Cabinet has approved the classical language status to be extended to 5 languages: Marathi, Bengali, Assamese, and even Pali and Prakrit. These 5 languages have also been accorded the status of classical language. So this brings the total number of classical languages in India to 11. So let's understand, what do you mean by a classical language? Is there any criteria to identify classical languages? And once the status is accorded to a particular language, how does it help? How does it benefit the particular language? That is what we need to learn and understand. See, according to the government, classical language status will help in preserving and protecting and promoting that particular language. So this is where we need to look at the history of classical language status in India. The first language to be accorded the classical language status was Tamil back in the year 2004. The then UPA government was the first to introduce the classical language status. There was a strong demand in Tamil Nadu to recognize the antiquity of Tamil language and its literary heritage. So based on this demand, the government of India had come out with a set of criteria in October 2004. The Ministry of Culture, along with the Sahitya Academy, brought out a set of criteria. 3 criteria were identified to recognize a language as a classical language. Let us see what are these criteria. The first criteria was the language should have high antiquity or recorded history going back to more than 1,000 years. Essentially, there should be early texts or records of the language dating back to more than 1,000 years. The language should have a body of ancient literature as well. There should be literary work which is considered as valuable heritage by generations of speakers of that language. And finally, it should have an original literary tradition which is not borrowed from another speech community or from another language. If these 3 criteria were met, a language could be recognized as a classical language. So accordingly, Tamil was given the status of classical language. Now, one controversy surrounding this topic is that usually the status is accorded on political grounds. Whenever the demand comes from a certain state to recognize their respective language as a classical language, quite often the criteria itself has been tweaked by the central government to accommodate that particular language, to fit that language so that it can be given the classical language status. In fact, when the Union Cabinet approved the classical language status to Marathi and even Bengali, Assamese, Pali and Prakrit, One controversy was this has been done keeping in mind the upcoming assembly elections, particularly in state of Maharashtra. So this controversy has remained in the past as well, when classical language status was accorded to Odia and Tamil as well. It was pointed out that more than the literary tradition and the classical nature of a language, the political factors are playing a bigger role. But either ways, even if it's a political move, it still benefits the language as it will bring dedicated funds. It will bring dedicated focus on conservation, protection and promotion of these languages. As you all know, India is a land of multiple languages. There are several languages spoken in the country with various dialects. The Constitution recognizes around 22 languages under the 8th schedule. Apart from these scheduled languages, there are plenty of other languages and dialects giving a rich linguistic diversity to India, to Indian society. So language is an integral part of human civilization, and so there is no harm in promoting and conserving and protecting these languages of India. So definitely, once Tamil was recognized as a classical language, one could anticipate similar demands coming from other states, from other languages as well. So accordingly, when demands came up for recognition of other languages like Sanskrit, Kannada, Telugu and the others, the then government of India constituted a linguistic expert committee under the Sahitya Academy. The Ministry of Culture, it established a linguistic experts committee to see if the criteria had to be tweaked, if the criteria had to be upgraded so that more languages could be given classical language status. So accordingly, based on the recommendations of this committee in 2004, the criteria was updated. So along with high antiquity, with a recorded history of the language, the time period was pushed to 1500 to 2000 years. Instead of the earlier criteria of just 1000 years of antiquity and recorded text, now the time period was pushed back to 1500 to 2000 years to ensure that the language is genuinely antique in nature. A body of ancient literature or text which is considered as valuable by generations of speakers, this criteria remained the same. Literary tradition to be original, not borrowed from another speech community. This criteria was also retained, and a fourth criteria was added. A new criteria was added. So the first criteria was updated, where the time period was extended to 1500 to 2000 years, and a fourth new criteria was also added. The classical language and the literature, it could be different or distinct from the modern spoken language, meaning there could be a discontinuity when you compare the classical language with the modern version of its language. For example, if you look at Sanskrit, Kannada, these are classic examples here. The ancient version of these languages were starkly different, and over a period of time, there has been discontinuity in the way in which the language has been spoken or the way in which the literary work has developed. And today, the modern languages are entirely different. If you compare ancient Kannada with, let's say, modern Kannada, you find a stark difference. Same with Telugu as well. So to accommodate these languages, this criteria was brought in. Even if there is a discontinuity when you compare the modern and the ancient languages, and even if it is distinct, still those languages could be recognized as classical languages. So based on this new criteria, many more languages were recognized as classical languages. So after Tamil, it was Sanskrit in 2005. Then Telugu and Kannada, both were simultaneously recognized as classical languages in 2008 by the then UPA government. This was followed by Malayalam and Odia in 2013 and 2014. In most cases, the controversy has remained that the classical language status is being accorded more on political grounds than based on the literary criteria. But either ways, as I said, it is good for the language. It always enables promotion of that particular language, and in a way it protects our linguistic diversity. So now there was a lot of pressure from the other states, especially from Maharashtra, West Bengal and Assam, and even from Bihar, to recognize the languages spoken in these regions as classical languages as well. If you look at Marathi, even Marathi has a rich tradition, but these languages were not matching the criteria that had been laid down in 2004. Then even if you look at Bengali, Pali and Prakrit, Pali Prakrit, especially in the Bihar region, right, was widely adopted by the then societies which followed Jainism, Buddhism. And if you look at Assamese again, it has a very rich tradition, but these languages were not meeting the laid down criteria. So there was a strong demand from these states, from the political parties, the governments, and as well as from academicians and researchers to give the status to these languages as well. So in 2013, in Maharashtra, a political movement and a literary movement began demanding classical language status to Marathi as well. Parallelly, we saw similar demands from Assam over the last few years. In West Bengal as well, similar demands came up. So following the demand, the government of India had recently considered whether these languages should be given the classical language status, and accordingly, the Linguistic Expert Committee under Sahitya Academy has again revised the criteria. Essentially, the criteria itself is being tweaked to accommodate the demands. So this happens to be the new criteria laid down by the Ministry of Culture. So high antiquity with a recorded text of 1500 to 2000 years, this criteria remains the same. Body of ancient literature and texts considered as valuable heritage by generations of speakers. So this criteria remains the same, but the third criteria has been changed. See, if you look at the previous criteria, it said that the literary tradition should be original and not borrowed from another speech community. Meaning the language has to be completely unique, distinct, and not borrowed from other language and literary tradition. But some of the languages here like Marathi, Pali, Prakrit, Assamese, they wouldn't meet that criteria entirely. Given that there is an element of borrowed element in the literary tradition of these languages. So that is why this criteria was entirely replaced. The new criteria says that if there are knowledge texts, especially prose or even poetry with epigraphical inscriptional evidence, that is, even if there is an inscription available, right, pointing towards a prose or a knowledge text, even that is enough to establish its literary tradition. So this new criteria was introduced because there are Assamese, Marathi inscriptions dating back to this period, which will allow these languages to also qualify for the classical language status. Even if you look at Pali, Prakrit, they wouldn't have been eligible otherwise. With the tweak which was introduced, now these languages became eligible. And finally, the classical language and literature could be distinct from the current form, and there could be discontinuity in the later offshoots. Because as a language evolves, different dialects might evolve. So different offshoots would have come up as well. So this is an accommodation criteria which was there before as well. So this has been retained. But it is the third criteria which has been entirely replaced. Previously, the condition was the language should be unique and distinct. The literary tradition should not be borrowed from another language. But that has been replaced with knowledge texts, including prose and poetry, even with epigraphical inscriptional evidence. This is enough to date the language and its literary tradition, and accordingly, the status can be provided. So with this new criteria, these 5 languages which were demanding the status, they met the criteria and they have been accorded the status by the union government. So Marathi, Bengali, Assamese, Pali and Prakrit. Now coming to the most important point, why do states and the concerned community which speaks these languages, why do they demand classical language status? What is so special about this? Apart from being an element of pride, apart from the linguistic identity getting a visibility, is there any other benefit by getting the classical language status? That is what we need to understand. There is definitely a big benefit. As I told you, even if these changes are being done for political reasons, right before elections or just to impress a certain vote bank, doesn't matter, because eventually this status will immensely benefit the language. Because once the classical language status is given, the language gets a lot of focus and attention. Dedicated funds are assigned. Dedicated initiatives are taken up by the center along with the state governments to promote, protect and preserve those languages. And this is very good for India's linguistic diversity. The Ministry of Education, for example, has established dedicated institutions. There are 3 central universities today set up in 2020 for promotion of the Sanskrit language. There is a dedicated central institute for classical Tamil, which is promoting the academic engagement and as well as the research as far as the Tamil language is concerned. So this is very good for academics, research, and even for translation and documentation. Because there could be ancient texts which has lot of literary value, historical value. So those historical texts can be translated to other languages, which increases the audience. They can be well documented, well archived using modern technology. They can be digitized, thus helping in preserving the language and the rich literary cultural tradition which is associated with it. So for this you need funds, and getting the status of classical language brings those funds. It will help in promoting the teaching of these languages across universities. Universities will be more encouraged to offer these languages as part of the academic curriculum. So this is great news for academicians, researchers, and the leading writers in that particular language. It will enable research, right? It will bring out new historical evidence, and even awards are instituted. National and international awards are instituted, which can even bring global recognition for these languages. The adoption of these languages, even in computing, in digital technology, is promoted. For example, the Central Institute of Indian Languages in Mysore, in Karnataka, has focused on research and promotion of languages like Kannada, Telugu, Malayalam, and Odia. So this is very good for the adoption, preservation, and the study related to these languages. Is that clear? It will also create job opportunities. Since the center will provide dedicated funds for the protection and conservation of these languages, there will be a lot of documentation work like translation of documents and digitization of documents, archiving of the documents. So this requires manpower. So it can create number of jobs in archiving, translation, publishing, and digital media, which is very good for the economy as well. So overall, the classical language status does bring in a lot of benefits. Now coming to my last point, let's see what the article in the Hindu is pointing out. The Hindu says that globally, if you look around the world, when you say a classical language, generally it is referred to ancient languages which are no longer spoken. For example, Latin or even Sanskrit. So according to global standards, it's only ancient languages which are no longer in current usage, which are no longer used in day-to-day conversation. Usually they are considered as classical languages. But in the context of India, of course, we have developed our own criteria in order to accord the status and protect and preserve those languages. So these 5 new entrants, they have a rich history behind them. You look at Marathi, for example. Latest research shows that Marathi dates back to a good 2000 years. It has a rich history of 2 millennium. In fact, to strengthen the demand for classical language status for Marathi, the Maharashtra government had set up a committee few years ago. This committee of researchers, they went into a lot of depth to bring out the archaeological historical evidence to establish that Marathi was indeed a language with ancient history and antiquity. So that establishes the cultural value, the historical value of the language as well. You look at Bengali and Assamese, there are inscriptions dating back to 3rd, 4th century BC. For example, on the Sanchi tree, plates and manuscripts have been found, including widespread usage in folklore, right? So that establishes the antiquity of these languages. Bengali also has been dated back to 3rd, 4th century BC. And as I mentioned, Pali, Prakrit, they were mass languages in today's Bihar region when Buddhism, Jainism was thriving. When Sanskrit became a Vedic ritual language, It was Pali, Prakrit, which were mainly spoken in this belt when Buddhism, Jainism was thriving in this part of ancient India. So there is a rich history behind these languages. So they will definitely benefit from the classical language status. Researchers have pointed out that Bengali was the language in which Rabindranath Tagore wrote his literary work and eventually was recognized with the Nobel Prize in Literature. But today it's unfortunate that many people in West Bengal, right, they don't speak the Bengali language. They're not well versed with the literary heritage and tradition of Bengali. So the classical language status will allow the Ministry of Education, the State Education Department to further promote the adoption of these languages. Right from school level to university level, the teaching of these languages, offering of these languages as dedicated courses can be promoted. It will definitely aid in promoting our national culture and heritage. As I said, the linguistic diversity of the country will be enhanced, and it will also bring funds for further research into these languages. It will enable academicians and researchers to tap more funds from the government and as well as maybe from the corporate sector through corporate social responsibility, so that they can use those funds for research to bring out new evidence and literary works which may have been lost and translate them into different languages so that it can have a wider audience. So that is the benefit of getting classical language status. So what kind of question can you expect here? Of course, you can expect a prelims question on the classical languages which have been recognized or the criteria, right? Very factual questions can come in prelims. But apart from that, you can expect a mains question as well. A very simple, straightforward question such as the Union Cabinet has recently approved classical status for 5 languages. Examine how the status will help these languages. So the question is very specific. It's talking about the recent development where 5 new languages have been given the classical language status, and you need to explain how does it help those languages. So in the introduction, you can start your answer by discussing the new update. You can mention that these 5 languages have been recently recognized: Marathi, Bengali, Assamese, Pali and Prakrit. And you can also add a brief history. You can mention that since 2004, the government has been according the classical language status. 6 languages were already recognized, and now a total of 11 languages are considered as classical languages of India. So that sets the context, and you're covering the background as well. In the body, you can discuss the advantages in 4 to 5 points, because it's a 10-mark question, right? There is a strict word limit of 150 words. You can't write much. So one small introduction, setting the context and the background, and 4 to 5 points explaining the advantages. You can mention how it will help in protecting, promoting and conserving a language, the benefit for research, how it will create jobs, right? The institution of the awards which can bring global visibility, and how it can be adopted in day-to-day life in modern technology as well, right? So 4 or 5 points is more than enough, and then finally conclude your answer. You can say that it will enhance the linguistic and cultural diversity of India. Something on those lines. A positive note where you say that classical language status will help promote the country's linguistic and cultural diversity. So that is more than enough. It's a 10-mark question. So this is more than sufficient. Now let's move on to the next article. I find this article to be very interesting, even though it goes into a lot of details. Some of you might think it's not needed for the exam, but still I feel the article is very relevant, very important and very interesting as well, because it examines the challenges being faced by Indian Railways. See, recently the Modi government carried out a big change with regard to railway budget. In 2016-17, the railway budget was merged with the regular union budget, because we had a tradition since colonial times where railway budget was presented separately before the union budget. For more than 9 decades, railway budget was separate from the union budget. But this tradition and colonial practice was brought to an end and more simplicity was introduced into the budget by merging the railway budget into the union budget. But over the last few years, the railways has been facing a financial crunch, not just because of the merging of the budget. In fact, merging of the budget has brought benefits. But irrespective of that, the railways is facing a lot of challenges, operational challenges, capital and expenditure related challenges, and safety related challenges. And everything is connected to the eventual money that is available with the railways. So there was a particular reason why the railway budget was kept separate, given the large capital expenditure and the high expenditure involved in operations, in maintenance. Railways was always seen as a top priority, given its role in connectivity through passenger services, its role in providing logistics through freight services, which was the backbone of our economy. The railway budget was always given that special priority. But now with the merger, it has brought in more simplicity and efficiency for sure. But railways is facing a lot of challenges, and most of the problems are related to the financial problems being faced by railways. So that is what we need to study and understand. The reason why this column has been brought out is because in recent months, railways has seen repeated accidents. There have been few back-to-back accidents. Recently, if you remember, we discussed the collision near Chennai, on the outskirts of Chennai, where a goods train collided with a passenger train. Fortunately, few people were injured, that's it, but no casualties were reported, right? No deaths were reported. There was another accident, a derailment in Assam. Again, fortunately, no casualties were reported. But last year, I hope you remember the Balsore tragedy in Odisha. A deadly collision between two trains on the same track. More than 250 people were killed, with hundreds of people injured. So these repeated accidents with deadly outcomes, it raises questions about rail safety. So we need to understand, where does India stand with regard to railway safety? Why are these collisions happening? Why are derailments happening? Can it be prevented? That is what we need to understand. And that's why, to understand that, you have to dive deep to understand the stress factors affecting the Indian railways. See, according to data, in 1960s, more than 1,300 consequential accidents were being reported in railways. This was a massive number. Given the old technology and the lack of safety norms, back then in 60s, 70s, 80s, the number of railway accidents occurring was very, very, very high. When I say consequential accidents, those are the accidents which have a consequential outcome or an impact, where there are significant injuries, deaths, or significant disruption to railway traffic and infrastructure. Only those were accounted as consequential accidents. So if you consider the non-consequential accidents, the number was much, much higher. So the number of accidents occurring in a year in this period of 1960s was 1,000 plus. So compared to that, we have made a big progress, because in the last decade, the number of consequential accidents in the railways has come down to double digits. It's around 80. The average is around 80. So you can say it's less than 100. But last 3 to 4 years, we have seen a bigger improvement because of the reforms introduced in railways by the Modi government, and including the merger of the railway budget and greater focus on safety in the recent years. Railway track record has definitely improved. Today, the average number of accidents, consequential accidents happening in a year, has dropped to 30 to 40 in a year. If you look at data from last 3 years, from 2021 onwards, the number of consequential accidents has dropped to 30 to 40, which is a very, very significant improvement. But of course, we should aim better, because the Balsore tragedy is a reminder that even in today's age of advanced technology, collision of trains is possible, which is avoidable. With the right deployment of technology, collision of trains is entirely avoidable. With proper maintenance and servicing, derailments is entirely avoidable. But yet, these accidents are occurring. Even 30 to 40 is still a high number, right? Effort has to be made to bring this down to single digits, to ensure we have just a few incidents in a year, not more than that. To achieve that, the railways is facing a big challenge. The main challenge is the financial challenge. The lack of financial resources, the financial constraints, is creating these challenges, which is adding to the stress factors which is present in Indian Railways. So again, if you look at the data, most of the railway accidents which occur, they are attributed to human error. Majority of the accidents, according to the railways itself, they are occurring due to human error, either due to mistakes by the railway staff or mistakes by the non-railway staff, where people are crossing railway tracks, which could possibly lead to sudden braking and a derailment, or miscreants might have meddled with the track, plus mistakes by the railway staff, either in signaling or by the pilots who are piloting the locomotive, or the station masters, or those who are controlling the crossings, the crossing points. So such errors which happen in the system, which are human errors, right? They are the primary contributors. Apart from that, technical failure, failure of equipment and failure in signaling is also a major contributor. Now, most of these factors can be tackled with better investments in safety, with improvement in operational safety, with focus on technology, with better training, and with better practices as far as railway personnel management is concerned. We can reduce the stress on the railway workers, because recent studies have shown that in our country, one of the most stressed workers are railway workers. They are overworked, overburdened. Many of the locomotive pilots are doing 12 to 14-hour shifts. They don't even have access to basic facilities. They don't have a basic toilet on the locomotive. They don't have access to clean water, food. They lack sleep. They are sleep deprived. And especially women locomotive pilots are facing even more challenges. So this is putting tremendous stress on the workforce. So if improvements are made in workforce management, in personnel management, if improvements are made in safety, adoption of technology, definitely these accidents can be brought down. If we invest more in repair, servicing and maintenance, a lot of accidents can be prevented. If we bring advanced technology into signaling, we can prevent most of the collisions. So this requires money. It requires financial support. That is where Railways is facing a challenge. See, now some of you might suggest, sir, Railways has developed a system called Kavach to prevent such collisions. Why don't we install Kavach everywhere, in every track, in every locomotive? The problem is Kavach implementation has been very, very slow because it is quite costly. Kavach is an indigenous collision avoidance system developed by Indian Railways. It essentially allows the pilot to track the location of their locomotive and be aware of the position of the other trains if they are on the same track. This will automatically trigger the alarms. It will actuate the sensors and trigger the alarms, and it will automatically initiate a braking protocol so that head-on collision between trains on same tracks is avoided. But problem is there is a margin of error here as well. And also installing Kavach across the railway network in every track, in every locomotive is quite expensive. As per data from Railways, right now only 2% of the total railway network is covered according to data from February 2024. Just 2% of the railway network has been secured with the Kavach system. And again, this is not 100% foolproof. So there is a need for rolling out Kavach across the country, but financial challenges are affecting the implementation. The cost involved is 50 to 70 lakh rupees. 50 lakhs per kilometer on the railway track, 70 lakh rupees per locomotive. This is where the actuators, the sensors are installed, right? On the locomotive as well, with a dashboard for the pilot and actuators and sensors on the track. The cost comes up to 50 lakh per kilometer on the track and 70 lakh per locomotive. Now, if you look at the overall railway budget, this amount is actually very minuscule. According to the Hindu, even if Railways were to cover the entire railway network with Kavach, it won't incur a cost of more than 2% of the total annual capital expenditure. Railway budget is massive. That's one reason why it was kept as a separate budget. So, even for complete implementation, 100% implementation of Kavach, the actual percentage of money spent by Railways would be around 2% of the annual capex. But this also is challenging for Railways Because it is facing a crunch. Its operational cost is very high. Its profit margin is very minimal. Its revenue has fallen, especially from passenger traffic. The revenues have been stagnant and it has been declining as well. So there are many financial operational challenges which is creating a limitation on the budgetary space available. So as a result, Railways is not able to set aside even 2% of its annual capex, which could have allowed for Kavach implementation across the railway network. Now coming to the financial situation, one important parameter is operational ratio in any business. OR. Operational ratio or OR is nothing but the money that you need to spend to earn 100 rupees. Now imagine I'm running a business. To earn 100 rupees in revenue, how much should I spend? Right? What is the money I'm spending on infrastructure, marketing and operational cost, etc. Whatever is left eventually becomes the operational profit. Railways is currently spending 98.2 rupees to earn 100 rupees. It is barely making a profit operationally. It has to spend 98.2 rupees to earn 100 rupees, meaning it's left with 1.8 rupees at the end of it. Now, this is not a good margin. The margins are very, very low. So basically, Railways has to depend heavily on budgetary and extra budgetary resources if it has to invest in something new. There is no margin left. What will Railways do with 1.8 rupees for every 100 rupees earned? That is barely sufficient to keep the operations running. Because Railways has a lot of operational cost, from fuel to various services, from power to water to salaries, pensions. The operational cost is way too high for Railways. It is a cost prohibitive business venture. So it's very challenging to make it a profitable business. It is spending 98.2 rupees to earn 100, leaving behind a margin of just 1.8, which is not enough for new capital investments. So where will Railways get the money from? It has to come from the budget. So Railways depends more on budgetary allocation and few extra budgetary resources, like raising a debt, raising a loan, or raising some unique fundings through which it can fund the new investments. But there is a big limitation on what budgetary allocation can be given and how extra budgetary resources can be raised. So this limits the ability of Railways to focus on capital expenditure, because there is constant pressure to create new railway routes, to bring in new locomotives, to improve the facilities. All of that requires investments and expenditure. At the same time, to focus on better work-life balance for the railway personnel and to improve the safety systems and operational protocols, it will require much more funds. And this crunch is mainly creating a challenge for the Railways. Now, if you see where Railways is generating revenue from, most revenue and even profits comes from the freight services, not from passenger services. The cargo transportation is the lifeline for Railways. Many of you might have a wrong assumption that Railways is making money only through passenger traffic. No, not at all. Passenger services is loss making for Railways, because as a government enterprise, it has an obligation to serve a social purpose, to ensure railway transportation is affordable for the common man. So as a result, the costs have been kept very low, right? Though the operational expenses are very high. So passenger related revenue is very limited. In fact, railway is incurring a massive loss on the passenger side. It is the freight traffic which is fetching the revenue and the profits. That's how the business has been able to sustain. So there are two major sources of revenue, internal revenue. One is freight traffic, the other is passenger traffic. Passenger services accounts for a very small percentage of the revenue. Freight services account for 65% of the revenue stream. Is this clear? Freight rates have also increased quite significantly because there is more flexibility for railways to increase freight traffic, because that will not immediately affect the common man. But if passenger tickets are raised, immediately there will be protest by the common man. Right? It will have political electoral implications. So governments are hesitant to increase passenger rates. So they keep the ticket cost low. Operational expenses keep on increasing. And as a result, passenger services becomes loss making eventually. Right? Eventually it has to be subsidized. But freight traffic can be increased. This is where the rates have jumped 3 times, by almost 3 times over the last few years. The draft National Railway Plan says that 30% of railway network is overutilized. Railway network is being overutilized. There is traffic, there is congestion, which is also slowing down the movement of the freight. This is a big challenge. Since railway is the backbone of our logistics, now be it coal, be it petroleum products, or be it various goods and commodities, including food items, right? They're all moved across the country through the railway network. So railway is the backbone of our logistical supplies. In fact, railway also owns most of the warehousing and storage facilities in the country, right? So it plays a critical role in logistics on the back end. And since the economy depends on the railways for transportation of goods and commodities, 30% of the railway network is always clogged. It's more than 100% utilized beyond its capacity, leading to traffic congestion that slows down the movement of freight. This increases the cost of transportation. Perishable goods will not survive. Cold storage facilities may not be available. So this increases the losses in the economy. That is why you need faster freight movement. That's what you see in developed countries. You look at developed economies. They not only provide for high-speed passenger connectivity, they provide for high-speed freight connectivity as well. So India is also working on this. We have the ambitious DFC, dedicated freight corridors. But as of now, only the eastern dedicated freight corridor has become fully operational. The western dedicated freight corridor connecting Delhi to Mumbai is still under construction. It's only partly ready. Once both east and west dedicated freight corridors are fully operational, this could transform India's logistics and freight movement. So Japan is a critical investor here. Japan is funding the eastern and western dedicated freight corridor projects and also helping India with the technology as well. There are new DFCs proposed, the East Coast dedicated freight corridor, East-West corridor and North-South sub-corridors. They are still in the planning stage. So maybe in another decade or two, once the DFCs are fully operational, that could ease the congestion as far as freight movement is concerned, increasing the speed at which the goods are mobilized and moved. But since coal is the biggest source of freight revenue for railways, there is one concern here for the future. See, as of now, more than half of the freight revenue is coming from coal transport, because most electricity today in India is generated through thermal power plants. Thermal power plants in India account for nearly 55 to 58% of electricity production. Alright? So out of that, they largely procure coal either from abroad, which comes to the seaports of India. So from seaports to the power plants, coal has to be transported. And also within India, the domestic coal which is used in power plants, it has to be transported from the mines to the power plants. So for thermal power industry, for coal transportation, railways is the lifeline. And this is the biggest source of freight revenue for railways. But in the future, we are moving away from coal. 15-20 years from now, the government is clearly shifting towards clean renewable energy. It's pushing the industry as well to decarbonize, to reduce dependency on fossil fuels. And eventually, we will cut down our thermal power plants and shift towards solar, wind, and nuclear and other cleaner forms of energy. Right? So if this transition happens, this is going to significantly hit railways freight revenue, as freight revenue is 65% of its revenue, right? And out of that, more than half of it is coming from coal transport. So imagine 20-30 years down the line, if let's say hypothetically we shut down our thermal power plants 30-40 years down the line, railways will lose a significant chunk of its revenue. At least 25 to 30% of its revenue will be wiped off. So railways has to plan for the future. It needs to not only improve efficiency in freight transport through better freight corridors, it should also ensure it can diversify its revenue stream. Coming to passenger services, as I told you, has been a big challenge for the railways, because there is a significant pressure on railways to keep the prices lower, because it serves a social objective to ensure railway transport is affordable, accessible to the common people, to the poor people as well. There is significant pressure on railways to keep the prices lower, right? This includes the political pressure as well, because this could have electoral implications. And even though passenger traffic has gone up, right, the revenue has taken a hit. The lower prices and the impact of COVID-19. COVID-19 dealt a severe blow. During the pandemic years, for 2.5 years, railway traffic didn't pick up. So there has been a significant drop and a significant stagnation of passenger revenue. Apart from this, railways has significant expenditure. It's not just the new investments in new projects, in new routes and safety. It has to invest in maintenance, servicing, repair, which is a depreciating asset. See, if a new route is created, that will at least be a appreciating asset. It will generate revenue for the railways. If railways invest in, let's say, safety, that is also appreciating asset. It will prevent accidents, reducing the losses. But just maintaining the existing locomotives and tracks is a depreciating investment, but it has to be done. So there is a dedicated depreciation reserve fund created for this purpose, and the Modi government has set up Rashtriya Rail Sanraksha Kosh, where the depreciation fund is moved so that railway has access to a certain amount of funds for servicing, maintenance and repairs. But here as well, railways is facing a shortage. Even though a dedicated fund is available, it's not enough to maintain the infrastructure, because railways maintains a massive infrastructure. This is one of the world's largest railway network. So it's not easy to maintain, repair them. And since it's a depreciating investment, it's been very challenging to make these investments as well. So this will compromise safety eventually. Imagine if railways doesn't have enough funds to repair and maintain the locomotives and tracks and infrastructure. Eventually there will be some accident which will occur because of this. Maybe the track integrity, structural integrity could be compromised, which could lead to a derailment, or signaling system may not work properly, leading to a collision, right? So this is how it is connected. That's why I said, even though it's an in-depth article, it'll actually help you understand why these problems are happening, right? Now, what should the railways do? How is safety getting affected? What should the railways do going ahead? See, as we understood, there are two different challenges. The railways is trying to satisfy two aspirations. One, it's trying to provide an affordable travel option for the common people. And on the other hand, it's trying to run a profitable business. So it's not a loss-making venture. It is making a profit, but the operational margin is very, very low. So one way out of this challenge is to increase the internal revenue. And this can largely come from freight traffic. Since passenger prices can't be increased beyond a certain point, right? Freight traffic can be increased at least to some extent without contributing to inflation, because these prices will eventually trickle down in the economy. If logistic transportation cost goes up, eventually it will trickle down and the cost of commodities could shoot up, leading even to widespread inflation. So within the limits, freight prices can still be increased. There is a margin available that can significantly increase the revenue. And also government will have to mobilize more funds through budgetary allocation. The railways is the backbone of the country. On safety, there can't be a compromise. You can't overwork the railway personnel and expect them to be diligent. You can't make them work 14-15 hours and expect them to be diligent when they are running and maintaining these systems, right? Where there is a need to introduce modern technology. We can bring in satellite-based guidance, right, which can easily help in avoiding collision, and roll out Kavach system, which is an automated braking system across the network. Such investments have to be made. For that, there is a need for budgetary mobilization. More capex allocation has to be provided, along with increasing the operational revenue. That is the only way out for Indian Railways. So this is what we learn from this article, and you can even expect a question on this topic in GS paper 3, because economy, infrastructure is part of your syllabus under GS paper 3. Examine in detail the capital, operational and safety challenges affecting the Indian Railways. So see if you can write an answer to this question, and please post your answers in the comment section. Now coming to the third article. The third article here is related to a deadly disease called Kala-azar, also called the black fever, right? It's one of the deadliest tropical disease after malaria. With regard to the deadly symptoms and fatality rate, after malaria, Kala-azar is one of the deadly tropical diseases. So let's see what is the development here, and what is Kala-azar, what causes the infection, what is the severity and where does India stand when it comes to tackling this deadly disease. That's what we need to learn. According to the article, India is on the verge of eliminating Kala-azar. We are applying for a certification from WHO because India is all set. We are almost there to meet the WHO standards, the WHO criteria to be declared as free from Kala-azar. At least Kala-azar will not be a public health concern in India. Until now, there is only one country which has achieved the status. It is Bangladesh. Bangladesh recently became the first country in the world to be declared by WHO as free from Kala-azar. It has not completely eliminated it, but it's not a public health concern. So the criteria according to WHO to get that elimination certificate is that you should report under one case per 10,000 population for 3 consecutive years. So it doesn't mean that the disease is eradicated. No, the disease might still be prevalent, but the incidence has gone down significantly. If a country is reporting below 1 case per 10,000 population for 3 consecutive years, and if there is a system in place, a robust system to deal with new cases, even if 1 or 2 cases come up, if the country has good surveillance and good disease management protocols, if these 2 standards are met, that is when WHO will issue the elimination certificate. So elimination is not eradication. Both are different. Eradication means there are no cases occurring at all. Correct? For example, India has eradicated polio. Elimination refers to under 1 case per 10,000 population for 3 consecutive years. Even if few cases come up, the country should have a robust system to deal with it effectively. So Bangladesh became the first and only country in the world to achieve the elimination certificate for Kala-azar. Now India is on the verge. We might become the second country in the world to get the elimination certificate for Kala-azar. So let's see what is Kala-azar. Kala-azar essentially is caused by a protozoan parasite. It's also called visceral leishmaniasis. It is referred to as black fever, black disease, mainly because of the discoloration of the skin, which occurs as a result of the infection. Lot of black and grey lesions break out on the skin as the infection spreads into the derma, into the dermatitis as well, and it leads to discoloration of the skin, giving its name Kala-azar or black fever or black disease. So it is mainly spread by sand flies. It is spread through the bite of an infected female sandfly. If an infected female sandfly were to bite a person, that is when the protozoan parasite gets transmitted, leading to the infection. And this is a disease occurring primarily in tropical countries, especially countries which are poor, which are underdeveloped, which have very poor hygiene and sanitation. So it is an outcome of underdevelopment. Even if you look at the spread of the disease in India, where Kala-azar cases were occurring, it was mainly in states like Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal. This belt is one of the poorest regions in the country, most backward as well. And the hygiene and sanitation has not been up to mark. So the underdevelopment of a region could contribute to the spread because sand flies will thrive in unhygienic places. And an infected female carrying the protozoan can transmit the parasite through a bite, leading to the infection. This can get very, very severe. The infection can affect your bone marrow, spleen and liver, leading to spleen enlargement. See, there are two different strands of this protozoan which causes Kala-azar. There is one separate strand seen in Africa and Europe, and there is a separate strand in India. In India, it's only Leishmania donovani. It is only this variant of the protozoan parasite that causes Kala-azar in our country. So please make a note. It's a slow progressing disease. It progresses very slowly, starts with very basic symptoms like fever, sometimes chills and body pain, but it graduates to a very severe disease where the spleen gets enlarged, liver function gets affected, and even the bone marrow could get infected. And post Kala-azar, the skin infection begins, where the dermal lesions will break out, the black and grey colored lesions will break out, giving its name Kala-azar. Right? So this could become fatal as well. India has lost hundreds of people every year. That's why I told you it is the second deadliest parasitic disease in India after malaria. In fact, in most tropical countries, it is considered as a very deadly disease after malaria. So as I told you, the threshold of WHO to get the elimination certificate is that for 3 consecutive years, you should have established that there is under 1 case per 10,000 population. And you should establish a system to track and monitor. You should have a surveillance system to detect new cases and treat them immediately. If these 2 criteria are met, that is when WHO gives the elimination certificate. Now, India has been free from Kala-azar for 2 consecutive years. When I say free, it's not eradication, it's elimination. It's not a public health concern, meaning we are reporting under 1 case per 10,000 in the last 2 years. So if this continues for another year, we have already applied for WHO, and WHO will give the elimination certificate by next year, which will make India the second country after Bangladesh to achieve this status. See, in fact, we had very ambitious plans to eliminate the disease long ago. Under the National Health Policy, India had set a target of 2010 initially to eliminate Kala-azar, but the efforts didn't succeed because we couldn't mainly tackle the sanitation hygiene problem. Over the last few years, the target has been revised repeatedly. The target was revised to 2015, 2017, 2020. Now, eventually in 2024, we are on the verge of eliminating it. Just 1 more year and India will get the certificate as well. This improvement is largely due to schemes like Swachh Bharat. So, credit goes to the Modi government for mainstreaming sanitation hygiene through Swachh Bharat initiative and for providing better facilities in the target areas, especially Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, UP belt, where most of the cases were seen and reported. So this helps in better vector management. If you want to prevent sandflies from thriving and breeding, you need to maintain hygiene and sanitation, maintain cleanliness, prevent water accumulation, right? So these aspects play a very important role, and thanks to initiatives like Swachh Bharat, India has been able to improve on this regard. See, even WHO has fallen short of its target. WHO had set a target to focus on neglected tropical diseases and get rid of disease like Kala-azar by 2020. It was part of Millennium Development Goal of United Nations, but this target was not achieved. So now under Sustainable Development Goals of UN, WHO has set a target of 2030 under neglected tropical diseases to eliminate Kala-azar with other neglected tropical diseases. So this global effort is helping countries, and especially India, through its enhanced monitoring and surveillance and preparedness, has been able to contain the spread of the infection. We have dealt with the vector, that is the sandfly, which mainly spreads the infection, and we have been able to treat the disease quite effectively, which has brought down the death rate as well. So we are on the verge of eliminating it. So by next year, right, if India maintains this track record, India would be declared as free from Kala-azar. Not eradicated, but eliminated. So it's no longer a public health concern. Now coming to the prelims section, let's take a quick look at the 2 small articles that we have in today's newspaper. On the front page, we have an article related to Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. I'm sure many of you are aware that in the last week, there have been multiple prank calls and fake calls to airlines issuing a bomb threat. This has severely disrupted civilian air traffic in the country, and airport operations have been severely affected. It's a very serious problem. So on social media, through masked IP addresses, miscreants are raising fake threats, and they are making these prank threats, which has led the authorities to either hold the aircraft and conduct security checks, or hold the airport operations for a while to ensure that the bomb threat is thoroughly checked, right? Every prank call, even it's a prank call, it has to be thoroughly checked because the chances can't be taken. So this has severely affected civil aviation, and hence the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security has held a meeting with all the airlines and the airport operators so that we can deal with such misbehavior which can disrupt civil aviation industry. So that is why this institution is in the news. So let's understand what is Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. It was established in the year 1978 after a hijacking of Indian Airlines flight in 1976. A bunch of militants had hijacked Indian Airlines flight in 1976, which raised the issue of civil aviation security to protect aircrafts and airports from such attacks and improve the safety standards, the security standards in civil aviation. So it was initially set up as a cell in the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, and later it has been placed under Ministry of Civil Aviation from 1987. So this institution was recommended by the Pandey Committee to enhance security and safety in civil aviation. So today it plays a critical role in ensuring operational safety across the airline industry, be it the anti-hijacking protocols to be followed by airlines, the crew members and the ground staff, or be it the security checks at airports, right? All these civil aviation security standards are laid down by Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. Even the CISF, the Central Industrial Security Force, which guards the airports in India, it follows the standards laid down by Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. So it follows the Chicago Convention. It aligns with the Chicago Convention on Civil Aviation, and in line with global standards, it implements and enforces the safety security standards in airlines and in airports. So that is the role of this institution. Next, on page 10, we have another important institution in the news. A statutory body has been mentioned, the National Commission for Women. A new chairperson has been appointed by the government. Vijaya Kishore Rahatkar has been appointed as the new chairperson of National Commission for Women. So let's understand some important facts about this body. It is a statutory body set up through a law, the National Commission for Women Act 1990, passed by the Parliament, provided for the establishment of this body. So that makes it a statutory body because it has a statutory backing. It is set up through a statute, through a law of the Parliament. The main function of National Commission for Women is to protect women's rights, to work towards women welfare, to look into cases of gender-based discrimination, women's safety, women's security. That is the primary mandate of this statutory body. It reviews the constitutional safeguards, legal safeguards present in the country to protect women and to empower women, be it welfare schemes, women's safety security schemes and initiatives. They're all reviewed by the National Commission for Women, and any case of gender discrimination or violence against women or women right violation, such cases can be investigated by the National Commission for Women. So it's a very important statutory body playing a critical role in promoting women rights and women empowerment. So the chairperson is appointed as per section 3 of this law for a 3-year term or until the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. The chairperson who is appointed will get a 3-year term or until they reach the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. Now looking at the composition, right? In prelims, such questions can be given. Statutory bodies, judicial, quasi-judicial bodies are important. So chairperson has to be someone who is committed for the cause of women. So generally, it is a woman candidate who is selected by the government, who has a proven track record in working in the field of women's rights. 5 members are also appointed. 5 members from NGOs, those who have experience in gender-related laws, those who have worked in the field of women empowerment, gender rights, they are given priority for appointments. And also the law says that there should be members from SC/ST community as well. 1 member at least shall be from SC/ST community to ensure there is inclusive, equitable representation. And there is a member secretary from the Indian Civil Services. Right? The Ministry of Women and Child Development, the secretary would generally be the member secretary as well. So this body plays a crucial role in reviewing the constitutional legal safeguards for women, in meeting the international obligations under various conventions, and also in looking at any case of violation of women's rights, violence against women, women's safety issues, and women welfare and empowerment. That is the mandate of this statutory body. So with this, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have understood everything, and if you have liked the session, do let me know by pressing the like button and do share your comments below. So that is it for today. Let's catch up tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day and do subscribe to our channel as well. Thank you. Thanks for watching.